We got some sweet modern for you today. You got 3 more rounds of Swiss, including this one, and then a cut to top 8. So lots of action still to catch today. Dan has kept his 6 here, starting things off here by sacrificing a Verdant Catacombs. We're going to go ahead and find something here. Good chance that we're going to have some sort of hand interaction. Whether it be a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition, we'll have to see. Dan will get an Overgrown Tomb. He could also have a Noble Hierarch here, though. Also not a bad one to start on. Yep, and it is in fact a Noble Hierarch. So the acceleration start for Dan. Let's see if Rick can match that. Rick is playing his own acceleration, of course. Alpha Tony, I'm not sure. Possibly. I haven't seen all the deck lists, and I've been downstairs, so I haven't really been walking around the tables. Potentially from out of town, yeah, maybe. Yavimaya Coast and an Ancient Stirrings, so Rick will fall to 19. Not quite the acceleration that he was looking for. Looks like... Let's see what he takes here with this Ancient Stirrings. We're going to go ahead and take a Temple, so that's not bad. It's acceleration next turn. Dan will untap here. Liliana is in hand, and it is playable. He does have the second black source. Let's see if that's where he decides to go with this turn. Looks like it is, yeah. Liliana of the Veil on turn 2, so this is a good start for Dan here. Bant Eldrazi is aggressive, doesn't have a great way to fight an early Planeswalker like this Liliana here, so we'll have to see what Rick can do to kind of fire back. Liliana is ticking up. Dan has already decided on his card. Rick having a little more trouble here deciding. Captain Harris, we know what side you're going for. The Abzan love here in the chat. Rick thinking long about what card he wants to discard as the Liliana trigger. All right, decides that he wants to discard his Bird of Paradise. So interesting, he did have acceleration on turn 1. He decided not to play it though. I'm a little curious as to why. All right, Rick with a Windswept Teeth, so he does not play that Eldrazi Temple just yet. Dan obviously knows he does have it in his hand still, but Windswept Teeth will be sacrificed, so Rick down to 18. He will get a basic Plains out of his deck. Yeah, no, I guess not. He must have just been looking for something. He could have found like a Sky Spawner possibly off of his Ancient Stirrings, so might have been looking for a turn 3 or a 3-drop for turn 2, but didn't get there. We're actually going to go ahead and we're going to Path to Exile this Noble Hierarch. Dan will go ahead and grab a basic Plains out of his deck. This is going to keep his colors all fixed for him. Rick, I'm not too sure why we're pathing that Noble Hierarch when we are, but at least want to path it like in... Looks like he pathed it in the upkeep, so it's not the worst, but... Alright, Liliana will tick up again. We're going to take a card from both players' hands. Dan, again, not worried about what he's discarding. Liliana is a great way to take this game over, though. Rick just, at the moment, cannot fight it, so... Rick having a hard time deciding here what he wants to discard. Another path to exile is going to be his choice, however. Dan discards Maelstrom Pulse and just says go. That's fair, I guess, yeah. Yeah, that's rough. That's rough there, Captain, but... happens sometimes. Here is a Thought-Knot Seer. We're going to look at Path to Exile and Fatal Push. It's a little bit awkward playing out this Thought-Knot Seer. I mean, you know your opponent has the answer to it with Liliana. Never mind the fact that Dan also has 2 answers in hand. We will take away Path to Exile. This means that at the moment, if Dan wants to remove this Thought-Knot Seer, which seems like a good choice, he'll have to take down Liliana, which I think is fine, though. Dan's not worried about that. His draw for the turn was a Grim Flare. We're going to start by taking down Liliana, drawing a card off Thought-Knot Seer. That's going to draw us into a copy of Scavenging Ooze. Which we will play for the turn. Rick still knows about that Fatal Push, does not know that Grim Flare is the other card. Reality Smasher here would be a pretty good play. It would be an answer to Liliana, which is great. Rick is thinking pretty hard here, so... not likely he has a Reality Smasher. I feel if you did, it's a pretty easy play to just slam a Smasher and go face. He does have a 5th mana here, Windswept Heath, which he will sacrifice before doing anything else. Let's see what he gets here. I believe there's a Drowner in his hand. I'm not. I think I saw a Drowner somewhere, but might have been in his Ancient Stirrings. But he gets a Forest, so just 1 damage taken. So 5 mana available for the Eldrazi player. Looks like he's going to use 4 of it. 3 of it in this case. Takes a point of damage. Picks up an Eternal Witness here. No green mana for Dan, which is really important. So he won't be able to eat whatever Rick targets with the Witness. I don't know if Rick has decided yet. Looks like he's going to take back potentially Path to Exile. Something, I mean, of note there, Dan didn't actually play a 4th land. So Rick knows that Dan doesn't have a land in hand to work with right now. So taking back Path could potentially give him access to something he didn't have access to before. Looks like he does decide to get Path to Exile back, however. On Dan's upkeep, he is going to fire off Path to Exile as well. Yeah, and Dan will get a basic land. I'm sure he's happy with that. He gets a Forest. Liliana's safe here, so we're probably going to see her tick up again. She has no reason to tick down and get rid of Eternal Witness right now. That's just not a threat he has to worry about. Dan did draw a land. He found a Windswept Heath, so he'll have 4 mana this turn if he needs it. I don't believe he does, though. His hand is Fatal Push and Grimflare. Now he is now able to Fatal Push away the Eternal Witness if he wants to, because of that fetch land. Although he was already able to this turn just because of the Path to Exile getting rid of Eternal Witness, or getting rid of Scavenging Ooze. Dan does go ahead and play out that Grimflare. So Rick knows what Dan has. Curious if Dan decides to... I mean, if he's going to use Liliana this turn, it's probably going to be to tick up. So you may as well push the Witness. I guess he's going to actually make Rick sacrifice Witness instead. He wants to hold on to that Fatal Push for another target. I guess that's fine. It's got other good targets in the deck to hit, so... Rick plays a Cavern of Souls, so he now has access to 6 mana. Drowner would be a good one. Thought-Knot Seer comes down. That has the potential to take a Fatal Push, but Dan's going to be able to use Fatal Push first. He's going to take 3 damage here. He's going to shock into play a Black Source and then push away this Thought-Knot Seer. And then, depending on what he draws, it may or may not be taken by Thought-Knot Seer, so we'll see what happens here. I mean, assuming it's not a land, it's going to be taken. So, yeah, Dan going to be pressed, of course, in using that Fatal Push. What do we draw? We draw and we exile an Abrupt Decay. All right. Not the worst thing to lose. Rick doesn't actually have a board state right now, so there's no good target for Fatal or for Abrupt Decay. In comes Grimflare. What do we have here? Land, instant, sorcery, so only 2 damage. So everything evened up at 14. And we have a Grimflare trigger, so we're looking at Path to Exile, a second Grimflare, and the third card I'm not too sure about. It might be an Abrupt Decay? I'm not too sure. Could be. Well, this is the one he's discarding here, it looks like. Okay, it was Tarmogoyf. Okay. Interesting. He doesn't want Tarmogoyf. Okay. That does give him Delirium, though, so that could be why he doesn't want it there. He now has creature, instant, land, sorcery. Rick has in hand just a brush land, so that's fine. Discard that. We still have 6 mana. Our draw is Yavimaya Coast. You may as well play it just because you don't want to have discarded Liliana. But now you're facing down a 4/4 Grimflare, which is going to set up the top of Dan's deck every turn. Path to Exile, Lingering Souls, Tarmogoyf. He'll discard Lingering Souls because that's better in the graveyard anyways. 2 cards on top of his deck. He'll play a second Grimflare here. Yep. Tick up Liliana. Flashback Lingering Souls first, sure. Yeah. Now we actually have lethal in play for next turn. So that is a very important flashback there on Lingering Souls. It's not full foil duo. Dan is missing. He's missing most of the bigger things. To be fair, he doesn't have his Goyfs. He has, I believe, 1 Liliana the Veil foil. But the majority of his deck is foiled. So Dan does take game 1. Heading into sideboards here, we'll start with Rick. Rick gets access to 3 Stubborn Denial, 2 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Spellskite, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Stony Silence, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, a Creeping Corrosion, and an All Is Dust. For Rick, Stubborn Denial could potentially be good here. Rest in Peace is probably okay. So is Relic for the same reason. Spellskite I'm not super excited for. Stony Silence doesn't do anything. Cage doesn't do anything except for stop Lingering Souls. Creeping Corrosion's no good. All Is Dust could be okay. Maybe, but we'll see. On Dan's side, we have access to 1 Engineered Explosives, 2 Surgical Extraction, 1 Zealous Persecution, 1 Collective Brutality, 3 Stony Silence, 1 Maelstrom Pulse, 3 Fulminator Mage, 1 Thrun the Last Troll, 1 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, and 1 Damnation. So, for Dan's sideboard, I like Explosives, no. Surgical, no. Zealous, no. Brutality, no. Stony's no good. Pulse is okay. Fulminator Mage seems pretty good. Thrun the Last Troll, no. Gideon, potentially. Damnation seems good as well. So, a few choices there for Dan. Duo 20, yeah, I like his deck. He's put a lot of time into it. He's got it. Again, he's not all the way there just yet, but he's got quite a bit of it foil for sure. So he's been working on it for quite some time now. A couple of our players here, a few of them like to get their decks foiled out. We have a couple. Jesse, his mono green deck is fully foiled out now. Mono green Devotion. If you've watched our stream before, I'm sure you know what that is. If not, it's like Genesis Wave and stuff like that. Primal Command Lock, those kind of things. Barry, the owner of our store, he's working on Foil Burn. In Montreal, he picked up his Scalding Tarns foil. He got a play set, so he got those done. The only things he's actually missing right now from his deck are, I believe, 3 copies of Searing Blaze. So he's pretty close to having his deck done as well. It's just a matter of finding the small cards that no one seems to have. So. Anyone else filling stuff out in our store? I don't remember at the moment. Probably, but. All right, so we're heading into game 2 here. Again, these guys are 2-0. Not a guarantee, but the winner potentially has a chance to double draw in the top 8. 17 players in the room, so just under half of them are going to make it into the top 8 here. We'll have to see, though. All right, so Rick will have the play. He's going to want to see his turn 1 acceleration, whether it's a Bird of Paradise or a Noble Hierarch. If I'm not mistaken, his hand has 3 Reality Smashers. So unless 3 of the other cards are Temple land, probably not the greatest looking keep. Rick's thinking here. Looks like Rick actually did keep here. Dan decided to mulligan away his hand there. I did see he also did have Damnation, so that has been brought in from the sideboard, which I think is a good choice. Just again, Big Eldrazi not always able to deal with them on a 1-for-1 basis, so Damnation being able to wipe the board, always effective. And the nice thing about Eldrazi is there's no man lands you have to worry about, so your Damnation will always get the whole board. Dan down to 6 here again, though it worked well from game 1, so we'll see if he can do it again game 2. He drew that Damnation again. Lingering Souls, Godless Shrine, Marsh Flats, Stirring Wildwood, so Inquisition, I believe, is there. Yeah, his Inquisition, Lingering Souls, Damnation is his spells. So he's got a turn 1. He's gonna keep here. I think that's fine. All right, so Rick will start things off here. He's gonna start it with a copy of Windswept Teeth, which he will sacrifice immediately. Oh, we also have Tim, who has a foiled out deck. I forgot about that one. It's almost done. He has mostly foiled and expeditioned out Bant Eldrazi himself. I think the only things he's missing right now are 1 Brushland foil and his Caverns of Souls. So Tim's also very close to being done his Eldrazi deck. But again, his has a little more spice with the expeditions for all his fetch lands and all his shock lands. So, all right, we go ahead and we grab, if I'm not mistaken, that is a breeding pool. We're going to start with an Ancient Stirring. So he could be digging for his acceleration. He did also bring in Rest in Peace, I can see there. His decision was the Eldrazi Temple. So if he was just missing the mana, he could have quite a few smashers coming here. We're going to have a look at his hand in a second, I imagine. Dan's draw for this turn was a Grim Flayer, so he has a good turn 2 play setup. We're going to start it off here, I imagine, by fetching out a Shockland and falling to 17. Yep, we get an Overgrown Tomb, so we're likely going to see Dan here. Well, we're going to see Dan fire off Inquisition right away. There's no question about that. I don't even know what he gets to hit, though. I think there's 3 Smashers there. Yeah, Rick, Smasher, oh, wow. Oh, wow, okay. Smasher, 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 Temple, Temple. He's got a full house. Wow. All right. That's cool. That's cool. We have some Spanish stuff. Not a whole lot in our store. 4-inch doesn't sell in our area very well, so... So Rick plays out one of his temples. Thoughtseize is going to see, again, 3 Smashers. Okay, so 3 Smashers and a Drowner. We're going to probably take away one of these Smashers is my guess. Dan's going to... Oh, Dan is just... Is Dan just... No, he's not dead. He's not in a good spot, though. Jeez. Because Rick's going to get to untap, play a Smasher, 5 him. Dan goes to 10. Dan doesn't currently have a way to kill a Smasher 1 for 1. He only has Damnations available. Or Damnation available, in fact. So he needs to play Lingering Souls into the double Smasher attack. And then hope he finds another land. But right now he has to shock himself to do that. So he'll have to play a Grimflayer instead. He takes Drowner. I don't know about that. Yeah, Rick, not a lot of thought here involved. Just 5 you go. His curve is working out nicely here for him. So Fatal Push is not a good spell here. So if Dan decides to go shock Lingering Souls, he's dead. Exactly. He needs to go Godless Shrine into play tapped, play Grim Flayer, say go, hope I don't die. Okay, yeah, he recognizes that. So we're going to have Grim Flayer come down. This will absorb all but 2 of it. Or it'll absorb 2 of it. So, oh, does he have path to... Oh, wow. All right, yeah, that's that. Okay. Rick just has all the answers. He drew a Path to Exile and even drew the land. He wasn't dead to trample that turn. He was dead if he played Lingering Souls with the... he was dead to trample then. He would have gone to 2 life, and he would have had to have found an untapped land. But even then, by not taking away the 3rd Smasher, he's dead the following turn. So he is dead no matter what. Just it might take an extra turn. Whereas Rick just says, you know what, let's not worry about an extra turn. Let's just kill you dead now. I'll Path to Exile your Grimflayer, and I'll 10 you. So an interesting keep gets the job done for Rick there. Rick battling out to try and make it 3-0 here. Neither of these players currently have a seat for our Modern Invitational. So both of them very much wanting to make this top 8 and take down this tournament. So all right, so Dan going to try to not mulligan this game, hopefully. He's had to mulligan both games 1 and 2. Game 1, it worked out just fine. He was able to control the board, and Rick couldn't do much. Game 2, however, he just got smashed. And that pun is intended. Just throw it out there. All right, Dan here has a Thoughtseize. My camera could focus. That'd be great. There we go. He's got a lot of 4 drops, though. He's got a 1 and a 2. His lands are Twilight Mire and Verdant Catacombs. So he's able to go, like, turn 1, fetch Godless Shrine, Thoughtseize you. Turn 2, Twilight Mire, play Grim Flare. And then he needs to find land. Because the rest of his hand, if I'm not mistaken, is Fulminator Mage, Siege Rhino, Sorin, Solemn Visitor. So both players have kept their 7. Dan could get into some trouble here if he doesn't find land fast enough. We'll see what happens, though. So I like this going in, grabbing a Godless Shrine. You don't want Forest, and you can't play Thoughtseize. What? I think he needs to get Godless Shrine is the problem here. I think, like, he's got 2 white spells in his hand. He needs to get Godless Shrine, I think, here, just because it's going to hurt to do it, but I don't think you have much of a choice. If nothing, like, if you don't want that, you have to go get a Swamp, at least. Okay, he decides to get a Swamp instead. He wants to take a little bit less damage here on his turn 1. He's still going to Thoughtseize Rick. I mean, this still lets him use Twilight Mire next turn, of course. That's fine, but here comes Thoughtseize. So down to 17 goes Dan. Rick will reveal his hand, which right now, Sky Spawner, Birds of Paradise, a second Sky Spawner, a Relic, a Drowner, and 2 Windswept Heath. So Rick wants this turn 1 Birds of Paradise, but Dan has the potential to take it away from him. However, Dan also has a Grim Flare in hand, so the Relic could be a problem. Interesting. I think I like... I think I like taking the bird still. Because the flare, even if it's not attacking for 4, still gets to have its trigger happen, which is all that really matters. So I think I like taking away the acceleration of the bird. It means that Rick needs to find a temple somewhere in his first 2 draws. So yeah, he does take away the Birds of Paradise. Rick will draw a brushland for his turn. I don't... Oh, okay, I guess that means he doesn't have to fetch it all yet, I guess, sure. So, Brushland into Relic of Progenitus. Dan's draw was, I believe, another Fulminator Mage, yes. Here is Grim Flare. Rick says, pick a card and exile it, please. Dan will exile his land. Yeah, makes sense. The only problem with this line is if Rick, say, did draw a temple there, he wouldn't have been able to play a turn 2 spawner. Or, yeah, Sky Spawner. So he'll just play Windswept Heath. He's on curve to have a turn 3 Sky Spawner. Dan did not, in fact, draw land. He drew a Tarmogoyf instead. Again, though, he does get to connect with Grim Flare regardless, so down to 18. There's his lands. He finds Lingering Souls, land. So Dan will Put Lingering Souls and Stirring Wildwood in his graveyard. He leaves, I believe, a Verdant Catacombs on top of his deck. Then plays a Tarmogoyf. So we have creature, land, sorcery. So we have a 3/4 Tarmogoyf right now. Relic just makes it a 0/0 or 0/1. So he'll make Dan exile a card. So now the Goyf is a 2/3. Back to being a 3/4 now because Rick will sacrifice his Windswept Heath. So Goyf is still a 3/4. Rick grabs his Breeding Pool, so he does have the Sky Spawner mana for next turn. Okay. Forest was the draw. Rick's only drawn lands so far, which is not good. He needs to find some action. And at this rate, he's looking at just a turn 6 drowner at the moment. He doesn't have any acceleration. He doesn't have his Birds of Paradise that Dan took away. He doesn't have a Noble Hierarch. Doesn't have Temples even. Rick looking over Lingering Souls, making sure I'm assuming make sure that's sorcery speed spell, which it is. So he'll play a Plains and a Sky Spawner. Well, the nice thing here, of course, the Sky Spawner summons a Scion that can be used to sacrifice to that Relic still to still get rid of these graveyards. Oh yeah, give him one of our tokens. That's right. Oh, we got to give Dan our spirit tokens. We didn't get those yet. Jeez, what are we doing? What are we doing? All right, here we go. Dan gonna untap. Draws for his turn. Draws that Verdant Catacombs. We already knew about that, of course. So if Dan wants to, he has the option to start the turn by flashing back Lingering Souls. He does have priority, of course. His hand right now is Sorin, 2 Fulminator Mages, and a Siege Rhino. He'll go ahead and sacrifice that Verdant Catacombs and a 16. Rick, if he wants to respond, can respond now to get rid of the graveyards. He decides not to. Goyf's still a 3/4. That hasn't changed. Dan will get a Temple Garden down to 14. So let's see. Fulminator Mage gets to blow up Breeding Pool or Brushland for what all it matters. Breeding Pool, the better choice because it cuts off a color. Yep, so sure enough, Fulminator Mage does come down. It makes black with that Twilight Mire. So no concerns there. In we come for a bunch of damage. So I mean, I think I'm fine probably going Sky Spawner. I think I'd go Sky Spawner in front of Grimflayer, Scion in front of Goyf, sacrifice Graveyard. So he's gonna Relic himself, drop the Goyf to a 2 power, or even better, put Sky Spawner in front of Goyf and pop Relic and just eat the Goyf. I guess that's not true though, because Fulminator Mage gets to make the Goyf a 2/3 again. So no, that doesn't work very well at all. So right now we're looking at 4 damage. So we are going to put this in front of the Grimflayer. Okay. Not much Dan can do to save the Grimflayer. It's going to die here. It will still get one trigger in because it does have trample. Rick will take 3. So down to 14 he goes. And then we should be seeing a Grimflayer trigger here. Yes, we do. Noble Hierarch, Plains, Lingering Souls. I mean, if Dan puts that Lingering Souls in the graveyard, I find it hard to not pop my relic on my turn at least. Noble Hierarch will go to the graveyard. And we're going to leave land Lingering Souls on top of the deck, so... Interesting. Dan's gonna fire off this Fulminator Mage. Like it. If I'm Rick now, I really want to fire off this relic though. This just gets rid of all the graveyards right now, which he drew a temple as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's really important that Dan actually killed that land. Otherwise, Rick would have had a Drowner this turn. And that's something that Dan doesn't have the easiest time answering. So. Rick is going to fetch away this Windswept Heath. I imagine he goes and grabs his Hallowed Fountain here. He does need blue mana. The issue here is Dan has a second Fulminator Mage. Rick obviously not aware of that. He hasn't seen Dan's hand. He hasn't had any thought on this game or anything like that. So with that being the case, Rick is going to need to find another way to get blue mana though. And I'm assuming that Dan has set up the top of his deck to be Plains and then Lingering Souls, which means that next turn he can play a Siege Rhino, or if he'd prefer, a Sorin Solemn Visitor. Both of them are 1-ofs in his deck, so... In comes the Scion for 1. Dan will fall to 13. Rick, a second Sky Spawner coming down. Asking for a second token here. We'll get him one of those. There we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and pop Relic now. I'm fine with this. So Goyf, now a 0-1. Rick's draw was a Cavern, so that fixes the blue mana problem. All right, there is that second Fulminator Mage for Dan. Goyf is 0-1. Dan, of course. Oh, they don't. Oops. We'll get Devin to fix that. That's easy. Fulminator Mage able to make this Goyf a 2-3. He decides he will go ahead and do that. So Goyf gets in for health points of damage there. Down to 9 is Rick. Another Sky Spawner drawn, so that's fine. Names Eldrazi, plays a third Sky Spawner. In for 3 more. Dan down to 10 now. We're in a racing situation here. I mean, Rick next turn is going to have a Drowner, though, which is going to change the race over to his favor. I imagine Dan's going to lead on Siege Rhino here, and then the turn after play a Sorin, but there's going to be 4 Eldrazi Scions available for Rick. Dan, again, knows about the Drowner, so he knows it's coming, but he doesn't know that Rick currently has the mana for it. I don't believe the Forest and the Temple weren't there. So, in comes Tarmogoyf for 2 damage. I think this is fine. You just take this. Actually, Dan might even play Lingering Souls here instead. Well, maybe not. If he was, probably would have played a pre-combat to get the extra point of damage on the Goyf, potentially. Alright, just 2 damage, so Rick falls to 7. Dan's follow-up here in main phase 2. What's it going to be? Are we going to go with the Siege Rhino, or are we going to go with Lingering Souls? We're going to go with Soren. What do we want to do? It's probably not going to be Soren, because post-combat Soren is just a 2-2 vampire. So Dan tanking here if he wants to go on Siege Rhino or Lingering Souls. Decides on Lingering Souls, it looks like. Wants to avoid taking extra damage in the air. Lingering Souls, very good at blocking Eldrazi Sky Spawners, of course. So, but he decides to go with Siege Rhino instead. So Rick will fall to 4. Dan will go to 13. Lightning Helix Rhino coming down. All right. Yeah, this is the big turn, though. Rick is going to drop... Oh, he drew a Thought-Knot Seer. That's interesting, but... I don't think you can get away from playing a Drowner here. The Drowner just checks this board. Like, yeah, I don't think you can get me to not play Drowner here. Like, I'm just... Play Drowner, attack you there for 4, you go to 9... I've got 4 or I have 3 signs. I got to use one of them to make mana for my Drowner. But so yeah, there's the 4 damage. Dan's down to 9. We're gonna sacrifice a Scion. We're gonna make 2 more Scions. 1 token, 2 tokens. We'll get them out here. And this has the board checked. He doesn't have a 2-turn lethal. I mean, if Dan goes for Soren, he's just dead. So I have to imagine to go for Lingering Souls. Fatal Push was the draw. It's not really going to do much here. It just means that he's in a much better spot to play Lingering Souls now. Yeah, Dan has to go for Lingering Souls. Hold up, Fatal Push. Yeah, Drowner of Hope is just such a good card. Just takes the game over. Dan is thinking here, he's going through all the possibilities here. I think he just wants to make sure that he's not... The Sky Spawners and the Drowner are lethal on their own. The tokens are not needed to do lethal damage here. Okay, so it looks like Rick said I'll go to combat, or Dan said I'll go to combat. Rick says I'll tap down your Rhino. No need to tap the Goyf down. The Drowner has that checked. I mean, I'm actually a little curious about why he even tapped the Rhino down, because Drowner checks the Rhino as well. I think he probably could have said let him go to combat. I mean, alright, sure. It's going to happen anyways, so I guess you just may as well do it, but... Lingering Souls, yeah, that's fine, sure. Get a pair of tokens and say go. It's all we can do. Time is ticking down here as well. We're below 5 minutes. It shouldn't matter with the way the game's going currently. Brushland's not a great draw here. Rick is going to Thought-Knot Seer Dan. It's a good place to start here. That'll take away the Fatal Push. Or potentially the Sorin. The Spirit token that is left behind, or the 2 Spirit tokens will be on blocking duty. There is Thought Knots here, so now we get to look at your hand. Do we take Sorin or do we take Fatal Push? I think actually we might take Sorin now. Dan's going to Fatal Push. I'm a little confused about this. We're going to Fatal Push a token? Sure. Sacrifice, tap down a Spirit? Like, that seems awkward. Yep. We go Sorin. I think you're just turning them sideways, right? Well, then I guess you're dead to a... You're attacking with the Drowner, I feel. You can attack with both your Sky Spawners. It is close because the removal spell does put a kink in Rick's plans here. Instant, sorcery, creature land. So the Goyf is also a 4/5 though, which is important. The die isn't... Yeah, there we go. No, it's a 4/5, right? Instant, sorcery, creature land? Yeah. Yeah, so there we go. That's important to keep note of because that means Dan has 2 lethal threats on board. I think if I'm Rick, I'm swinging with my 2 flying creatures, making Dan decide if he wants to block or not. Okay, he just passes back. He doesn't even attack at all. All right. Dan will untap and draw Lingering Souls in the graveyard, ready to flash back for 2 more Spirit tokens. This is a close game. Again, 2.5 minutes now on the clock, so time may become a factor here. Dan thinking here as well. Path to Exile was a good draw, though. It'll take care of the Drowner of Hope. Rick will go ahead and grab a land out of his deck here. And then we're going to swing in with everything. So we've got to block Rhino and Goyf. There's no choice there. Yeah, Rick is in trouble here. His hand is just a land right now. If it was like a Path to Exile or something like that to deal with one of these bigger threats, it would be much, much better, but 2 lethal threats is... It's not game. He can put a Sky Spawner in front of a Goyf. Thought Knot in front of the Rhino. Yeah, I guess you can put Sky Spawner and Thought Knot in front of Rhino and Sky Spawner in front of Goyf. You take 2, fall to 2. You still have a blocker available with the Sky Spawner. He has to draw something good. Dan will still have to have flashback on Lingering Souls. Yeah, Drowner should be exiled. It doesn't change the Goyf counts. That's fine. Just a little bit of a minor fix there. So I believe these guys are now in turns. So Dan should be turn 0. Rick looks to be lining up the blocks to kill the Rhino. Yeah, he does. Alright, so he double blocks the Rhino. Dan will get to draw a card here with the Thought-Knot Seer dying. Rick will take 2 damage and fall to 2. One Sky Spawner is going to die. The Thought-Knot's going to die, and the Rhino will die. Dan will draw 1 card off the Thought-Knot dying, of course. 2 mana, we're going to flashback Lingering Souls, get a couple more tokens. Goyf's power does shrink down. It's a 3/4 now. Drowner's the best draw here for Rick. Was that even enough? No, it wouldn't. Oh, yes, it would be. Drowner would be enough. But he does not find it, so Dan will take a close...